My name is Andriy Shevchenko, and from behalf of the Ukrinform Media Center Ukraine, I welcome all the journalists who are telling the world about our fight for freedom. Our guest is Olga Stefanishyna, Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine on European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. Olga, tomorrow the EU summit is beginning. What are our expectations? Thank you, Andriy. Dear journalists, citizens of Ukraine, yes, really, we have expected that this intrigue about the decision which will be adopted on Friday will be discussed. But the decision is such historical, not only for Ukraine, but for the EU as well, that almost all of the leaders of the EU confirmed that as of today we have consensus about the approval of the first in the history of our independence legal decision about the beginning of the accession to the EU and the EU candidate status for the membership in the European Union. We are expecting that this decision will be approved in the morning on the 24th of June, taking into account the high level of consensus which we have now. Maybe this decision will be taken even tomorrow in the evening. So of course, we are getting ready to the conditions which we have to be compliant with, which are now documented in the conclusion of the European Commission, which also recommended to provide the candidate status for Ukraine and foresaw some of the recommendations we need to do to go to the next stages of negotiations. We are already preparing the roadmap to implement those recommendations, which will be soon presented and approved by the President of Ukraine. So altogether, I'd like to drive your attention to the fact that the process of the approval of this decision and our way to this decision has begun from the application to the membership in the EU for the 5th day of the war, in fact. And this is an unprecedented speed which the European Union showed considering this decision and is getting ready to provide the red light for the Ukraine's membership in the EU. During the last 2 months, the governmental team, the presidential office, the Speaker of the Parliament, the MPs, the civil population were in the European capitals. I'm thankful to the citizens and communities who are temporarily displaced for their active position and the promotion of this decision for Ukraine. And even today we can say that this advocacy work and direct political involvement at all of the levels led to the decision which is unprecedented. Just recently, Ukraine hosted the leaders of Italy, France and Germany who were ambiguously supporting and confirming their readiness to provide the candidacy for Ukraine. There has never been such a decision for a single country which joined the EU during the last 20 years, and it witnesses that we know how to promote the decisions which are compliant with our political interests and historical moment. We are expecting that after the adoption of this decision, the priority will be the issue of the rebuilding and reconstruction of Ukraine, the construction of the new infrastructure, the support of Ukrainian economy, and undoubtedly the finalization of war with the mobilization of additional military support. The candidate status, besides the important political signal, gives to Ukraine a totally different status in the relations with the EU. In particular, we, as the candidate country, get access to the structural funds of the EU, which is the totally uncomparable money with what we had before, which will be spent for the restoration of Ukraine and the creation of the resilient competitive economy. Now we are speaking about, in fact, of hundreds of billions of euro, which will be accessible for us after we get such a status. Moreover, we do hope and expect that tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, the leaders of the EU won't only give us the candidate status, but will definitely and specifically mention that we are moving in the direction of the membership in the EU and will have financial and economic mechanisms as for the country which has to become the member of the European Union. Of course, we are working on the defining of the next steps after we get the candidate status, as of today we understand that after the conditions which are defined by the European Commission, we will be able to speak about the beginning of the negotiations. So I do urge all of you, please join the common work to implement these conditions, and separately I'd like to express my gratitude to our civil society, the citizens of Ukraine, without whom in fact our huge political work wouldn't have such effect as it has today. And I would like to drive your attention to the fact that the decisive element of the adoption of the decisions at the leaders' level was the unprecedented support of the movement to the European Union among the citizens of Ukraine. That's almost 90% of the citizens and almost 70% of the EU citizens, even in the most skeptical countries, which they supported the movement of Ukraine to the European Union. Thank you. Hello, Viktor Melnikov, CGTN. Could you please tell which problems and issues we need to overcome for our state to get the candidate status and to transform it into the status of the member of the EU? And is there any probability that the candidate status won't be given, because there are 3 states who recently mentioned and stated that they were against such a status. As of today, and those states which were skeptical about us, as the Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden and Portugal, have precisely and publicly stated that they support this decision. Now we have the full consensus of the 27 leaders that Ukraine will get this candidate status. I hear lots of discussions in Ukraine, not abroad, that we shouldn't lose the status which we never gained so far. So I do appeal you, please, don't have this inferiority complex. We are the country which could restore itself for so many times, and we could raise, even during the war, we showed such a high quality of work, advocacy and involvement, and lots of countries, even during the peaceful times, couldn't show such a high level as we did. So when we have the full mobilization of the parliament, government, president and civil society, I don't see a single reason to be skeptical. As for the further steps of the membership in the European Union, but it will also depend on when the war is over and when we are able to be competitive to strengthen European Union, and the European Union would strengthen us, not vice versa. Microphone, please. Could you please tell what are the conditions which we need to be compliant with, and which are the problems we need to overcome? And maybe I can add, if you allow me, out of those 7 spheres which are defined by the decision of the European Commission, which are the biggest challenge for us? As of today, the conclusion which has been published by the European Commission is about the compliance of Ukraine with the Copenhagen criteria of membership, the rule of law, the governance, and the human rights. This is not the whole spectre and range of issues. 7 points which are defined by the European Commission are not absolutely complicated or they are not accomplishment. They can be accomplished. Each of them are serving the interests of Ukraine, and today we will focus to implement them. These are the issues which concern the changes in the legislation about the Supreme Qualification Commission and the formation of these institutions, changes and amendments to the legislation about the selection of the judges of the Constitutional Court. You do remember the constitutional crisis which took place more than a year ago. This is the beginning of the selection of the director of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. So all of those measures are being implemented to some extent, will speed up those processes and finalize their implementation, will adopt the necessary laws, and this process should be over up till the end of the year. Any other questions, please? Hello, Anastasia Naritsina, Apostrophe TV. I have a question. How much time will we need to have these 7 steps, and for Ukraine to become the full-fledged member of the EU? How much time do we need for that? We count that up till the end of the year, the implementation of all of these steps is totally possible. I think that the majority of them will be even implemented quicker than the end of the year. That is about the approval of some legislation and the implementation of some of the technical tasks. In the end of the 2022, the European Commission will provide the assessment and the conclusion whether we were efficient enough coping with this task. And it's our interests because we'd like to speak about the beginning of the negotiations already. Victoria Nakonechna, Ukrinform. I've got two questions. First, it's still about the recommendations of the European Commission. Who will be the coordinator of the process of the implementation of those recommendations? Can you, as the line Vice Prime Minister, speed up this process? And the second question is about the NATO summit in Madrid, where they should represent the new model of the defense of the eastern border of the alliance. In your opinion, which could be the role of Ukraine in this new model, and what are you expecting from this summit? Thank you for the questions. In fact, the position of the Vice Prime Minister on European and Euro-Atlantic integration is introduced and exists in the government to speed up the processes. So, undoubtedly, the coordination on all of those recommendations will be done by me. But the priority, of course, is it is for the President of Ukraine, the head of the Parliament, Verkhovna Rada, who are ready to do whatever is possible, together with the Prime Minister, to implement this process. But the speed and coordination will be done by the line Vice Prime Minister. As for Madrid summit, we don't have any high expectations of this summit. We do not see the adoption of the strategic importance decision for Ukraine. They will adopt and approve the strategic concept of NATO for 10 years. As far as I can see today, this document won't include important breakthrough provisions or decisions which would substantially impact the issues of the finalization of war and the development of military events on the territory of Ukraine. We are expecting that during the summit they will adopt the comprehensive package of aid from NATO, which will also concern the relations of the eastern flank of NATO countries. It's hard to speak about any interaction because the Black Sea is blocked, and today NATO does not offer any solutions about this issue. And as for the trainings and interoperability, this work is ongoing now, because you know that the armed forces of Ukraine are actively using NATO armament and weapons. And I'd like to confirm that from the perspective of the implementation of NATO standards, the preparation and the military combats are done according to the NATO standards, which we have been implementing before the 24th of February. Are there any other questions, please? One more question, then. The European Commission declared that they could take this status back if we are not compliant with all the conditions. Is it true? If they provide this status, and if we don't do something, can they take it back? And will it be some threat for Ukraine, as in fact? We will never give back our status of the candidate to the EU. This announcement was a bit distorted, in fact. I don't think that the European Commission could appeal to these statements because there was a huge political will in the decision which was taken on the 17th. It's more of the speculation. I will have the question then. It's obvious it's not the time to open champagne and to celebrate, not only today, but on the 24th and the 25th as well. But still, how will Ukraine respond this decision? Because it's very symbolic. Do you plan any steps? What do you know about that? We are planning certain measures on Friday and on Monday, and as far as I know, in the Parliament on the 1st of July, there will be some of the events and measures about this decision. I cannot tell you the details, but still we will be as active as possible communicating, and since the first hours of its implementation will accomplish the tasks which would allow us to achieve the next level. But when I spoke about the support of this movement of almost 90% of our citizens, we would be grateful if the communities and the people were also celebrating this event, either raising the flag of the EU or any other events and measures which would allow us to feel this moment all over the territory of Ukraine. Please. Could you please tell how can the status and the membership status of Ukraine in the EU, how can it help during the war with the Russian Federation? I can remind you that the revolution of dignity started when at one moment that president at those times decided that Ukraine shouldn't go to Europe, that Ukraine should come closer to Russia and be afraid of Russia. This is not the choice which was made by the Ukrainian people. So in fact, the candidate status is the first in the history of our independence legal decision which would define that we will be the part of the bigger family of democratic countries. This is the first legal status which Ukraine has, but this symbolism is important because it's connected with the historical decision for the EU countries, which have never approved it so quickly and never created such a powerful consensus about the positive decision. And for us, of course, it is so important that it is a very comprehensible and precise sequence of the involvement of financial resources to restore our country at the high scale. First of all, of the cities which were destroyed because of the occupation, and also the restoration of infrastructure and economic activities. My last question then, when will the civil opinion, the citizens' opinion and the political position of the EU, when did they change for us? Well, there were lots of such moments. When we began our advocacy activities, we had only our traditional friends and allies who supported such a decision. We did not have a very precise position of the European Commission or European Council. The majority of the EU countries persuaded us that we shouldn't form any expectations because it's just impossible to adopt such a decision. In 2 months, we just changed this situation cardinally at the level of all of the EU capitals, because there was the individual communication with each of the leaders, with each of the parliaments, and after each of the visits we had positive announcements of the leaders. So I cannot just define any day or time when it changed. Just weekly the number of the countries which supported this decision increased. Thank you. That was Olga Stefanishyna, Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine, about our expectations for the summit of the EU, which will take place on the 23rd, 24th of June. Thank you. Please follow our announcements. Stand with Ukraine.